March, where it was confirmed at that time he had the coronavirus. So the family of Lord Bath announced that he has died at the age of 87 after testing positive for coronavirus. So the government has urged the public to heed the lockdown rules today, despite the warm weather, and threatened that outdoor exercise could be banned if that message isn't heeded. But balancing protection of the public and the restriction of civil liberties is a fine line, and some argue the government might have gone too far already and would certainly go too far if they banned exercise. Let's hear from Sherelle Jacobs from the Daily Telegraph. She joins us now. Sherelle, hello to you. This sort of warning in the last couple of hours from Matt Hancock that if the rules aren't heeded, the government might threaten the banning of all exercise. What do you think?
I think it's a step too far. I think a cooped up and increasingly anxious and frankly depressed public feel that they are being castigated and in some instances even persecuted for finding a little joy in the sunshine while adhering to the social distancing rules. And I don't think it's helped that a lot of the rules haven't really made much sense. For example, people being stopped for driving to isolated places. Can't personally see why that is any worse than somebody walking to their local park. Why were the garden centres shut when that encourages people to spend time in their gardens rather than, again, piling into the local parks? And I think it's important to make the point that there is no law that says that driving to an isolated spot, for example, is illegal. And the vague wording of the coronavirus bill has been very problematic. We see this time and time again with vague legislation, everything from hate crime legislation to the terrorism bill being used for things as absurd as blocking deposits of insolvent banks. And technically, we are moving towards living in a police state, i.e. police enforcing rules that have no real legal basis. And I also want to make another point, which coincides with this breaking news about lockdown being made even harsher. And I'm cynically wonders whether this is
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. I'm your host, Sam Sloan, head of GSS Video'S is what I do. And in this video,
towards the public in terms of culpability, because
we're going to talk a
the
bit
death toll
more
is going to
about
continue
the
to rise and
coronavirus.
peak next week. Some
Because
people are saying. And
people are still taking the coronavirus
we shouldn't let this debate
as a joke. It's not a joke, it's a serious illness. Right?
We
people need to take it seriously.
We've seen a lot of failures this week, the inability to get crucial equipment to the NHS,
coronavirus seriously,
questions over testing, and ultimately questions over the government's decision to lock down the country without an exit plan.
We can come over
this.
I'm
sure the government would say that they're not trying to shift blame at all. I'm sure they would say that. Taking you back to whilst you were talking, some of the pictures that we were showing, which show a mixed picture across the country. Some parts admittedly look pretty busy, some look very quiet. It doesn't seem like this is a one-size-fits-all situation. And I'll just guys put to you some of the arguments for a more stringent or at least adhering to the current rules. Lots of NHS nurses and workers on social media putting videos out. And one in particular in the last 24 hours, which says this NHS nurse, we're on our knees here. Anyone saying we can go out, it's not a big deal. Tell them, no, you need to stay at home because we are struggling to do everything we need. Are the public picking up enough what the health workers are saying about staying at home? Maybe trying to reinforce people not going out and socialising in a park.
Ask us.
Yes, but I think that people are also weighing that up with the commonsensical view that as long as you adhere to social distancing, then you are very unlikely to be spreading the virus. And I think it's true there isn't a one-size-fits-all policy. But I would stress that rather than shutting down everything tomorrow morning, the government should consider maybe speaking with, local parks and beauty spots which have seen people crowding in, and perhaps closing those places. But I really, really hesitate to support the idea that people should not be allowed out of their homes at all, apart from going to get groceries. I think that this is a marathon, not a race. This could go on for weeks, and I think that it would be a poor decision to put people effectively under house arrest if this is going to go on for several weeks longer, which it probably is.
there's definitely a public health question to weigh up against it, of course.
What
about from the police point of view? You know, I suppose some police officers would say, even if right now there are only a minority of people lying down and having a barbecue, maybe using the park to meet up with a couple of friends, even if it's only a minority now, the numbers don't exist for the police to crack down on it. Other people see that happening and going to the park,
business
and
that working
a bigger problem, so they have to start being more stringent now.
For us,
I just think that it just comes back to my point that it's very, very important that the public stays on board and that the public will towards this effort continues. And I think it is a balancing act. I think that in some instances the police have been quite overzealous. You know, frankly, going to people's shopping bags to see whether they're buying Easter eggs. These are the kinds of stories that make people feel like
people
they are,
people going around
emotionally engaged in this effort, this collective effort. I think that it works both ways. I think, yes, there are people who are perhaps not taking this seriously, who need to take this more seriously. But I think that the police also need to find ways to engage with the public in a constructive way.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Appreciate it.
Or ask what you're doing now.
Let's have a look at the weather while we're talking about it. It is, of course, a lovely day in store for most of us with southerly winds bringing us temperatures. There will be long spells of sunshine, but as we've just been discussing and debating, the message is clear at the moment from the government. Enjoy it at home as best you can and try not to go out. Almost all of the UK mainland will be bathed in sunshine today, but skies will become rather hazy over western parts as the cloud and rain over Ireland begin to push east. Temperatures likely to reach mid to late teens for many because the potential to see values of 21 Celsius in the sunniest spots and 70 Fahrenheit, and it will be increasingly windy through the day with coastal gales in the west. By the evening, the wet weather will have taken over western Scotland, Wales, and the southwest. It will move eastwards overnight, clearing all of the eastern counties, East Anglia, and the southeast by tomorrow morning, and some clearer skies will follow with a scattering of showers tomorrow. Those will be heaviest and most widespread in the north and west. Temperatures remaining a little bit above average tomorrow. Stay with us next. There are fears that 450,000 Africans could contract COVID-19 by May. Can the continent's fragile health systems cope?
Hang on, just sharing the podcast a bit more. All right. Hello, my friend. How you doing? Thank you. Please comment below. Please comment in the comment section. It's just this side here. We're going to be talking about the coronavirus, and I'm getting people. I want to get people's views on the coronavirus. What do you think of the? What do you really think of the coronavirus? And what are you doing to defend yourself from catching the coronavirus? And if you're a key worker, what sort of hassles, what problems are you facing doing your day-to-day business, like your work, with the coronavirus hanging over your head? I think everyone needs to respect, and I mean need to respect the key workers. Every key worker out there. You name the key workers. Every key worker, everyone who is considered as a key worker needs that respect. Right? Everyone needs respect. If people go out for any more than an hour to do the weekly shop, if you're not a key worker, you only really need an hour to do your weekly shop, right? You only need an hour to go for your daily exercise, right? You don't need any more than an hour for your exercise. You don't need more than an hour for your weekly shop, right? So why are people being out of their homes longer than an hour? Why are people being out of their homes and not wearing protective masks, like disposable masks and disposable gloves, right? I wear when I'm doing my weekly shop, right? I wear gloves, right? Disposable gloves, and I wear a mask, right? I don't even walk to the shop at the moment. I drive, right? Because that way I'm in my home, I'm in my car, right? And I'm in my car. It's only got my germs, me. So you've got me.
Welcome back to Sky News. A reminder of our top stories for you today. The Health Secretary Matt Hancock is threatened to impose stricter lockdown
in an area where
obey rules and stay in despite the warm weather. The Queen will make a rare televised address to the nation this evening, which will insist its generation is as strong as ever. And the number of cases and deaths in Spain has continued to fall for a third successive day.
I'm in my car. That's my protective bubble.
So with that warmer weather drawing the public out, there are renewed warnings not to flout the lockdown guidance. It comes as hospitals find themselves under increasing pressure from rising patient numbers. And Transport for London announced 5 of its bus workers have died after contracting COVID-19. Ali Fortescue reports for us now on the pressures on those frontline staff as the nation's lockdown continues.
The front line of this virus comes in many forms, from those caring for us to the people keeping food on the shelves and the drivers making sure those who need to can get to work. But day by day, we're hearing the stories behind the statistics. And now Transport for London have confirmed that 5 bus drivers have died from COVID-19.
It cannot go on like this. It's got to be stopped. Unite the Union are demanding that first thing tomorrow they cease these cash transactions so that the virus cannot be transmitted to our drivers.
And as the cases rise, hospitals are preparing, cancelling operations and moving staff. But increasingly, they're strained. This Hertfordshire
bus drivers,
closed their
bus companies need to put
problems with their
oxygen supply. Right, in between the bus driver and the customer.
Whether the government's central message has stuck.
To protect
you must
the bus driver.
Stay at home to protect the NHS and to save lives. Whatever the temptations this weekend, please don't go outside to visit the lakes, the beaches, the countryside. Take pride instead in keeping your own families and communities safe.
Yeah.
Temperatures are set to peak and staying at home will be
going to the seaside? So whereas people go to the beach or to the park?
I think it'll be very challenging though, bear in mind the weather forecast.
At this time of now. At this time.
Inevitably now being sort of locked in or it's self-isolation for a number of days. The temptation is to go out and enjoy the weather, enjoy the sunshine. What police officers have normally in abundance is discretion. And
ambulance staff,
explaining why this is happening.
GP staff, doctor staff,
in public and go home.
After another quiet Saturday night, the country begins its second Sunday in lockdown. We're being asked once again to stay at home.
Postmen.
But no one knows how long this wait will be. And
carers,
will be becoming impatient. Sky News.
All of them are key workers.
As the number of positive cases in Africa more than doubled in 1 week, London
and if you go out for you to the shop,
the continent could
see you're still with your sister.
1,000 people test positive for COVID-19 by the second week of May, and that would put its fragile health system under a severe test. Joining me now is the Regional Medical Director for Africa at International SOS, Dr. Buchi Tsai. Dr. Tsai, thank you for joining us. Tell us at the moment, in terms of the continent, is there broadly a joined-up approach to restrictions?
I'm doing here, right? I'll show you what I look like. At home now, you're at home.
Thank you for inviting me. Certainly for Africa region as a whole, we have had quite a period of time to prepare. And so for each country, we know that there are 17 countries now with some kind of curfew restricting the amount of hours people socialize with each other. And we also know there are 12 countries in total national lockdown, and also additional 12 countries with partial lockdown.
This is what I'm aware.
For certain cities or for
this is
certain
what I'm out
services.
While doing my daily work, my daily shop,
we are now in a national lockdown, which means
this.
only essential services will continue to be operational. So certainly there is a concerted effort from all of the public health authorities in Africa to control this outbreak. But how it's rolled out will really depend on the specific countries.
Does a restriction and advice like social distancing present any unique challenges in the context of the continent or not?
Weekly shop.
For sure. So in Africa, a lot of the measures, the public health measures that we are advocating will actually be a luxury for most of the Africans living in this region. For example, hand washing. How do you wash your hands when you don't have access to running water? And social distancing or staying at home or home quarantine will require that you actually have a place to stay.
Good man.
And that it's not overcrowded.
Someone needs to.
So
that's good.
Sure, a lot of
that's good. You're taking it serious, my man. That's good.
That's good. Have a unique challenge in that there are local limitations. And so each country will have to be very adaptable and flexible in terms of how they implement these kind of lockdown measures or public health measures. So, for example, in South Africa, the government has set up more than 60 mobile testing stations, especially communities that are vulnerable and communities who may not have access to the kind of testing, the kind of social distancing that's available to a lot of other people.
I can add on Facebook on my timeline.
Just in terms of the time mentioned at the start of our interview, the time that the continent
because Facebook's been gay
in Europe, and maybe some of the West African countries' experience of Ebola, a much more fatal disease. Is there hope that some of the health systems will have the expertise and the experience needed to try and cope with a large number of people who might suffer from COVID-19?
So certainly Africa has had its fair share in contagious diseases such as Ebola. And for a big part, many of the health systems are set up to contain
ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, can I please
whether it is up to the task of setting up such a large scale
click the share button on this podcast. Share this podcast far and wide.
Really,
get this podcast out there. Share it far and wide.
The capacity of each of the health system is not exceeded. And that is why some of the African authorities, they have started to implement really strict measures in order to make sure that the health system capacity is not exceeded and to make sure that the number is really kept down. So today, in total, Africa has more than 8,000 cases. And compared to other continents, it's actually doing very, very well. And I think in part, it's because of the strict early measures that's implemented by several of the governments.
And Dr. Yuchi Tsai, thank you very much for your insights. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Now, the Queen will address the nation this evening in a televised broadcast, and that will only be her 5th such statement. As households across the UK endure this second weekend living under lockdown, what impact will the monarch's words actually have? Our home editor, Jason Farrell's been speaking to people in East London to see how they feel about the Queen's decision to reach out and reassure the nation.
Shut down.
What do you think?
Cooped up. The grimness and drudgery of lockdown is stunning.
And it's
Can the Queen connect with the nation?
You're supposed to be wearing it all the time, my man.
And what she said matter, for example, to people queuing for food outside Sainsbury's here
all the time.
in London.
It will make no difference to some people, but it will make a big difference for others. So, yeah, I don't see any harm in it at all.
I would, yes, definitely. And does that kind of thing help, do you think? Might help, yes, of course.
Community spirit is flourishing. On this street, the coffee shop owner now uses his supply lines to create a local grocery store.
because I'm not isolated, I think maybe I'm a lot of people's only contact. So everyone seems really happy to see me and seems to think that it's a nice community thing I'm doing. But also, like, I mean, obviously, like, if everyone's staying indoors, they're going to be isolated.
But little things spike tensions. Why, when other London parks are open, did the local council shut Victoria Park in Hackney, forcing exercise away from open spaces?
I think it's an absolute disgrace.
I think it did, yeah, it did.
Obviously, initially, people didn't get the social distancing rules,
park,
and
right,
you know, it was quite busy.
It's closed down.
As you can see
yeah,
now,
the play park,
you know, basically it's forcing people out onto the paths, cyclists onto the roads, which, you know, could cause accidents to go into hospital. I think they're much better off opening the park, personally.
There's a real concern that not enough being done to protect our health workers. And in the charity sector, some people trying to help on the ground say no one is helping them.
Grassroots charities who actually reach out to the community
needs to be open,
and don't
so
get
people
paid.
can walk through them,
We're not allowed
people can
loans.
cycle, people can run round it.
I've been refused by my own bank to try and see if I can pay the rent.
Well, wouldn't they say
and
play
the
football
impact is
because
that people in the community are lost.
Having lost the income from her charity shops, Nevers Kamal still delivers hot meals to the vulnerable.
And don't worry, things are going to get better.
Would she take solace from hearing the Queen speak?
God bless the Queen. The Queen has been a figurehead of this country for many, many years. She has seen and heard and done so many, many things. We expect this from our Queen.
It is a rare thing for the Queen to address the nation in this way, no doubt calling for national unity and resolve. But this is an unprecedented national moment. Whether you've lost a loved one, or risk losing your job, or are simply frightened, this is something we are all experiencing together, a shared national trauma, and for some, it cuts deep. We are reeling from the death toll figures, living on a diet of depressing news, braced for what comes next. Some just want clarity and facts, but for others, the Queen is a symbol of national spirit.
Have your say. What are we going to do?
With the right
what
words,
are we going to do? How are we going to take it seriously? Are we going to take it seriously? Because if we don't take it seriously, we're going to stay our country.
You can see, of course, the Queen's address to the nation. We'll have it during a special programme with Dermot Murnaghan here on Sky News from 7 tonight.
Right.
Well, as Europe struggles to control the pandemic, there is hope in China. That's where it started. Number of cases and COVID-19 related deaths there are gradually decreasing. Our correspondent Tom Cheshire has the latest for us from China.
So 13 new cases reported in China yesterday. It's up from 19 the day before. So I think that shows two things, really. One is there is hope, there is cause for optimism. China used to be in the hundreds, and it's brought its numbers down to a much lower level. And that has been the trend for a long time. But the other thing is just how hard it is to eradicate coronavirus.
Please share the podcast.
Very strict
Please share the podcast.
It's been restricting foreign nationals from coming into the country. It's banned foreign nationals from coming into the country. Most of its cases are imported, but among those 30 cases were 5 new cases of local transmission in Guangdong in southern China. So that just shows you still have to keep managing this outbreak. And pictures on social media today of tourist sites being crowded with people going to see stuff shows you can't really relax for a second with this. So it does offer some hope, but it also shows this is going to be a very, very long battle indeed. This is day 9 and we can't leave the hotel, but you know, it could be a lot worse. Everyone around the world is in a very tough situation. It's good to talk to friends and family about that. And also, I think just bearing in mind why it's happening, having a sense of purpose. The reason we're restricted is to try and stop the spread of coronavirus. So keeping that in mind, I think, makes it a lot more bearable.
Tom Cheshire there in China. You're watching Sky News. Coming up next, we'll look at the importance of mental health and well-being while we stay at home during the lockdown and indeed the good weather.
Please share with our podcast. Get more people into the broadcast. Get more people into the broadcast. Encourage them to talk about the coronavirus. We need to get this out there. We need to get people to be at home. Most of the time, be at home. There's things that we can do at home in the protective area of our home. Our houses our houses, our flats, our bungalows, our protected bubble, right? In a time like now, right? I am actually going to make, while I'm locked up, I'm locked down, we locked down here, in the, because of the coronavirus, I'm actually working on making myself a bar, right? I'm converting my shed into a bar. It's still going to be a shed. Half of it's going to be a shed, and half of it's going to be a bar, right? I've got some black curtains going down one side to hide all my garden tools behind this black curtain, right? And the other side, the biggest side of that bar, of that shed, is going to be the bar. I've done a little bit to it just to see what it's going to look like when it's actually finished with, if you know what I mean. It's done and finished. That's what I've planned. So, it is, so far, I think it's going to look good when it's finished. I actually think it's going to look good, and I can't wait to finish it. It's really, really, really good. It's really good. They're going to plan all the drinks every week. They're going to stock up with drink in the bar. Right. 1 week I can get loads of beer and ales, and 1 week I can do beer. Next week I can do that ale, and then I can do.
Welcome back. With many families self-isolating at home, keeping on top of mental health and well-being during these challenging times has never been more important. There are lots of support services and charities out there to help those who might be struggling while staying indoors. One of those is Carol Idden, Deputy Executive and Managing Director of Children's Services at Action for Children. Carol, thanks for speaking to us today. I think, we speak to you at a crucial time with the sun out, people staying at home, maybe don't think that they can take their children out for good reasons. Those are the rules at the moment. How are you advising people with kids at home to try and keep their spirits up when it's so nice outside and we can't go out?
We're working hard with our families using whatever means we can, phone contact, digital contact, to try and keep their spirits up and to support them at times when they're feeling particularly stressed and worried about the situation. We also do supply them with some activities that they may be able to do with their children, both indoors and in the garden if they have one, but a lot of our families don't have any outdoor space and are therefore cramped within the home. We do advise them that they can go out for a walk or very local to home, but to make sure that they do keep within the social distancing rules. That's actually quite hard to do if you've got a couple of youngsters who just want to run because they've been locked up at home. So it is very challenging for them, and a lot of the parents are struggling and worried about what will happen and no sense of when this might all come to an end.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, children of a certain age will obviously be asking their parents why, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Why do we have to stay indoors? How do you give comforting answers to children with those questions?
And we advise parents to try and explain the situation, and again, have given them some resources to do that. But it is difficult, and in particular, they might think it's great to be off school for a little while, but then they start to miss their friends, and they don't understand why they can't go and see their friends. And if you haven't got access to social media, where they may be able to contact their friends using FaceTime or something else, then they start to feel quite isolated. And then they're also pick up on their parents' anxiety. Children are not immune to that, so they'll pick up that maybe mum or dad are worried about money and about where they're going to get food from and how long this is going to go on. And family tension will increase. There's no doubt about that.
Get some paints.
Just thinking about the slightly longer term effects of this, I mean, we haven't had a really clear answer on when we might see an easing of these restrictions. I think several of the experts advising the government have sort of tentatively said we're looking at being in this situation until at least the end of May. I mean, particularly with kids who maybe are only children, or actually kids with siblings as well, longer term potential mental health challenges that they might face. I mean, are you worried at all about how this social isolation might manifest itself further down the line for kids?
Yes, we are. Kids are quite resilient generally, but the longer it goes on, the less resilient they will be over time. And I think one of the other pressures that parents feel a little bit is that they need to educate their children at home, and sometimes the children don't want to do that. And we sort of say, every child is going to be in the same situation when they do go back to school. So, teachers and schools will be thinking about how to support their pupils after the school when this stops. And that will include thinking about making sure that if they have got anxiety or their mental health has been compromised in any way, that they put the resources in place. Now, schools will need support to do that, and the government will need to help them find resources to do that. But there are ways in which we can continue to support. But the longer it goes on, the more difficult that becomes for individual parents. And if you're a single parent with a single child, then that makes it even more difficult, because that's the only relationship, that's the only interaction that you're having if you can't use social media to interact with others in perhaps in the wider family.
Wear gloves. Carol, some great advice. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. Appreciate it.
Wear masks.
Carol in there from Action for Children.
When you get home,
let's have a look at the weather for today.
Before you get home,
it is a lovely day, of course, for most of us. Southerly winds bringing warmer temperatures. There will be some long spells of sunshine. A reminder, though, the government message at the moment is clear. Try to enjoy it at home as best you can, and don't go out. Almost all of the UK mainland will be bathed in sunshine today, but skies becoming rather hazy over western parts as the cloud and rain over Ireland begins to push east. Temperatures likely to reach the mid to late teens for many. There is a potential, though, to hit 21 Celsius in the sunnier spots. That is 70 Fahrenheit, and it will be increasingly windy through the day with coastal gales in the west. By evening, wet weather will take over western Scotland, Wales, and the southwest. That will move eastward overnight.
Hand sanitizer at the moment, it's gold dust.
By the morning. Stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up next, we'll bring you the latest on the government's lockdown warning that further measures might come into place if people continue to flout their rules.
Right. But if we don't take it, if we don't take it seriously, we'll all end up having armed forces patrolling our streets with loaded guns. We will. You will see the armed forces, you will see the army, you will see the Royal Air Force, you see everything. Every Royal family, you will see the Royal Air Force, or the Army, or the Marines. Wherever you are, you probably see them patrolling our streets because people can't take it up on themselves to be protective of each other. They may be protective of each other. People need to wear protective masks. People need to wear protective masks. People need to wear gloves, disposable masks, or if you've got like washable masks, wash them, clean them. Right? I've got reusable masks. With mine, you've got these are reusable masks. Right? These masks here are reusable. Right? You wash them, right? And then you dry them, and you reuse them. The hospitals, they use the disposable masks. Right? Because of cross-contamination. We need to stay at home. If we've got no reason to be out, right? For daily exercise, it's really need an hour. You only need an hour to be a daily exercise, right? Yeah, we only need an hour for daily exercise. We only need an hour to be your reach shot, right? So, maybe an hour to 2 hours at a push. Right? You don't need to panic buy. If you stop panic buying, we have more and more food. We still have food on the shelves. Right? And there's enough food to go around. It's stupid people going out panic buying that is making it harder for other people to get food. Right? people need to stop panic buying. I know at the moment times are tough because of the coronavirus. I know that, I understand that. But if we stop panic buying and help each other, support each other in times like now, in tough times like now, right? And we stay at home, we don't need to be out, right? We'd be able to get the UK, right, or whatever country you're from, right, to be clear from the coronavirus. And whatever country comes clear first, we're better get back to normal life, but we have to still keep their airports, their dockyards, their ferry ports locked down until the rest of the country, the rest of the rest of the countries are clear for it too. So if the UK gets done, gets sorted fast,
it's 1 o'clock.
We can get back to normal. We can go back to work, go back to school, go back to
further
college.
lockdown measures might come into place if people continue to flout their rules and go out to enjoy the warm weather. You're putting others' lives at risk, and you're putting yourself in harm's way.
Cleared.
The frontline NHS workers still struggling to get the right personal protection.
Of the coronavirus. The coronavirus, we don't want.
They're doing some of these high-risk procedures and trying to hold their breath because they're unsure and unaware of whether the mask they've been provided is going to offer them adequate protection.
It is.
Also coming up, the Queen will attempt to lift spirits in a rare address to the nation this evening. And a glimmer of light in Spain, where both the number of cases and deaths continue to fall.
To call it that. But at the moment in time, at this moment in time, because
the
coronavirus
is
a Chinese
has criticised sunbathers for breaking lockdown
virus.
He's warned that those people are ignoring the advice to stay at home and said if they fail to do so, further restrictions, including the banning of outdoor exercise, could follow. That's appeared to gain the backing of the new Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, too. This is what the Health Secretary had to say on Sophie Ridge on Sunday about those ignoring the rules and enjoying the good weather.
It is not a request, it is a requirement in law, and people need to follow it. And I just say this to the very small minority, as you say, of people who are choosing to flout the guidance. You are putting others' lives at risk, and you're putting yourself in harm's way. And so we are very, very clear about that guidance. And
so does that mean, just to be crystal clear, that sunbathing is against the law?
Sunbathing is against the rules that have been set out for important public health reasons. And I wish I didn't have to say this.
It's not against the rules
because the whole country wants to come through this crisis. The whole country wants to come through this, of course.
There's no point of sunbathing in public places.
Way to come through the guidance, the crisis.
In your own garden, you're fine. You can
to
do what you
save
want
lives and to protect the NHS and reduce the pressure on the NHS.
When I say your own garden, it's got to be your own private garden.
Follow the guidance.
It can't be a communal garden.
Unless you've got one of the
communal gardens are still public.
Set out.
Right?
Our political correspondent Rob Powell joins us now. Rob, this is really just the first weekend of weather and a fairly strong message from the government.
A communal garden.
Exactly. Remember, we're only 2 weeks into this first stage of 3 weeks of lockdown. I think the working assumption is that come a week on Monday, it will probably be extended by some distance sometime again. And I think what Matt Hancock is really trying to do is just send a message to people to say, don't get complacent, especially when the sun comes out. We have seen some pictures this weekend of people in parks, a lot of people exercising, but also people sunbathing. Matt Hancock saying that's against the rules, and also going further today and saying that they may have to bring in a complete ban on exercise outside if people don't follow the rules. And that was something that the new Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said his party would back if needed.
Exactly. See?
What's important is that we support the government where that's the right thing to do, but ask the difficult questions. But we ask the difficult questions not to score party political points, not just because we can, but so that we can point out what we think are errors so they can be put right. But I'm clear that whatever measures are necessary to save lives should
each
be
other,
taken.
ourselves and each other from the coronavirus. We don't respect the rules.
But I think the priority is to protect
we'll not be allowed to go out at all.
These messages coming, Rob, because they want us to try and flatten this curve so that we can get out of the social distancing sooner rather than later. But we're still unclear as to exactly the strategy to get us out of that.
Absolutely. That's how this is all linked, really. The government says, and scientific advisors say, well, if people just keep this up, keep apart, then the peak will be lower, the curve will be flattened, and it will mean that plans for an exit strategy out of this lockdown may be able to come along sooner. At the moment, we don't have a timescale, though, or really any specifics on how these lockdown measures are going to be eased. I think part of the reason for that is that the government and scientific advisors are still waiting to see exactly the impact of the last 2 weeks of lockdown measures, and are waiting to see the data and how that really feeds in to the epidemic growth of this outbreak. But Matt Hancock today, when he spoke to Sophie Ridge, did talk about a few measures that would be used to get out of this: testing, treatment, and also vaccine. Have a listen.
I've got 6 masks.
The UK has put more funding into the global search for a vaccine than any other country around the world. And I'm working very closely with the Defence Secretary and the Foreign Secretary on that, because they've been leading that global search and put their budgets into that. And then, as well as obviously treatment and vaccines, testing matters as well. We had a very big discussion about testing over the last week, and we have a clear strategy to increase the amount of testing.
I think everyone in government recognises that lockdown is not an end state, and that at some point there will need to be a cohesive exit strategy and way to move out of this. I think what might put extra pressure on the government to spell that out could be a sense of tension between the need to prevent the outbreak spreading and look after the health of the nation, and the need to protect the economy and to try and make sure that permanent damage is not done to businesses across the country. I think right now, whilst they're still unable to tell us how this all ends, they're probably unwilling to as well, because I think the sense from government is they don't want to give the public any reason to take their foot off the pedal in terms of social distancing, and really want to encourage them for the foreseeable future to stay at home.
Okay, Rob, thanks. Something that might be geared towards that as well is the Queen speaking to the nation tonight in a rare address from Windsor Castle amid the pandemic. She will insist that Britons of this generation are as strong as any in facing the crisis.
Start taking the coronavirus simply
the message from Queen Elizabeth.
Serious.
Inside Windsor Castle, from where she's watched this crisis unfold, the Queen has recorded her message to the nation, her own deeply personal words of reassurance. Broadcast tonight at 8 o'clock, she will say, "I'm speaking to you at what I know is an increasingly challenging time, a time of disruption in the life of our country, a disruption that has brought grief to some, financial difficulties to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all." She will praise the work of those on the front line, the NHS workers, carers, and those keeping the country going, describing how proud she's been to see Britain pull together. "I hope in the years to come, everyone will be able to take pride in how they responded to this challenge. And those who come after us will say that the Britons of this generation were as strong as any, that the attributes of self-discipline, of quiet, good-humoured resolve, and of fellow feeling still characterise this country." The Palace and Number 10 would have decided now was the right time for her to speak, as the cases of coronavirus keep going up.
It is a tough time. A lot of people are worried about their livelihoods, their businesses, their jobs, and I think that she wants to show solidarity with those people, to show that as the head of the state, as the head of the nation, that she's there to represent us all, and hopefully we can get through this together.
Her Majesty has only given this kind of televised address on 4 other occasions during her 68-year reign: the Gulf War, the death of Princess Diana, the death of the Queen Mother, and to mark her Diamond Jubilee. This one is even more unusual, filmed with only one cameraman in the room, wearing a face mask and gloves after advice from the Queen's medical team. Ever since the restrictions around coronavirus came in, the royals had to completely change the way they work, effectively having to work behind closed doors, which means that when we see the Queen's message, there will be something reassuring about seeing the 93-year-old monarch in person, as well as listening to the message that she has to give to the nation. In 1940, Princess Elizabeth gave her first ever broadcast from Windsor Castle to other evacuees. 80 years later, from the same place, she will again address the nation. Britain's longest reigning monarch, reflecting on her own experiences of other difficult times, as she knows her country again needs her sympathy, support, and a sense of hope. Rhiannon Mills, Sky News.
Rhiannon joins us now live from Westminster. This has been such a fast-moving crisis, Rhiannon, but according to the experts, we have quite a long way to go. So why this message from the Queen now?
I think lots of people have been asking when exactly were we likely to hear from the Queen, and everything that I was hearing along the way from the palace was it was a case of when and not if she was going to give a televised address like this. I think you just have to look at the scale of the outbreak, the extent that this is having an impact on everyone's day-to-day lives, and it was naturally going to be the case that she would address the nation. Of course, it is very rare for her to do this kind of televised message. She's only done it on 4 other occasions, but these are extraordinary times. And as she talks about in her message, those little snippets that we've had already, she talks about how this is a difficult moment for us all. And simply in the way that that message had to be filmed, that was very much the impact for her. I'm told that it was very logistically challenging. The fact they had to choose a room that was large enough that the Queen and the sole camera person that was in there could be enough of a distance between them. Everyone else from the technical side of it had to be shut away in a separate room. And usually for a message as historic as this one, of course, you'd expect a huge crew around her, making sure that everything ran smoothly. But simply the advice from the doctors was this is what they had to do to make sure the Queen was put at minimal risk. Within that message, we know that she is going to reflect on other difficulties, other difficult periods that she has faced and the country has faced during her very long 68-year reign. But I think one phrase that really stands out to me, where she talks about fellow feeling, it sounds like a phrase from another generation, another era. And of course, the Queen is very proud of the fact that she is part of that wartime generation. And tonight she will talk about the fact that in the end, yes, we are going through these very challenging times, but her hope is that Britain will be able to look back at this period
how you doing, my friend? How you doing?
How we all reacted.
Rhiannon, thank you. You can, of course, watch the Queen's address to the nation tonight.
Your name comes up and you've got
special programme with Dermot Murnahan, which starts from 7
How you doing, David?
Well, as the Queen looks to reassure the nation, the UK saw its biggest rise in deaths from people with COVID-19 yesterday. A total of 4,313 have now died in the UK. The number of deaths rose by 20% yesterday, but the growth rate has slowed slightly. That's the number.
When you go out,
doubling around every 3 days now. Let's speak to Helen Smith, who joins us from the Sky News. How much can we take from these figures at the moment, Helen?
Well, we're being advised by the experts to be very cautious. There may be some tentative causes for optimism, as we said, with that slightly slowing growth rate. But we know that it's at least a 2-week lag between the imposition of any lockdown measures and those being reflected in the data. So the experts, the government, continue to advise us to approach this with caution. As you said, every day, very sadly, the death rate is still going up. Yesterday by 708, the biggest we've seen since this crisis began. And we must always remember that there are people behind those numbers, and it is a horrifying rise. But some analysts might be taking a glimmer of hope from what is a very grim picture, because that rise yesterday, although it was a rise of 20%, and that is obviously horrible, 20% is a slightly slower growth rate than we have seen in some previous days, certainly earlier this week. So perhaps an early indication that curve that the politicians and the experts continue to talk about might be beginning to flatten, but really we caveat with a lot of caution. We will need to continue to look at these numbers for a number of days.
Yes, I'm at home. GSS Video's Studios is at home. It's his home and all that.
Regionally as well. Yesterday was the very first day that the highest number of deaths recorded was not in London, Yesterday it was in the Midlands, and the death rate in London actually fell.
I think in here, there's a Sky News I've listened to live on
something that has been going on for the last few weeks since this even started, really, has been the request for frontline doctors,
as well as I'm talking to yourselves about the coronavirus, because the coronavirus should be
well, the round continues really. The Health Secretary and the government promising that they're working incredibly hard to get that protective equipment to the doctors and nurses on the front line. But earlier this morning, my colleague Sophie Ridge interviewed Dr. Rinesh Palmer, who's the chair of the Doctors Association, and he said that frankly that's just not happening quickly enough. So much so that doctors taking matters into their own hands, set up their own app to try and survey themselves. To see what the situation was like, and that came up with some very stark numbers that he told Sophie about earlier.
Wearing
43% of doctors have said they've got absolutely no eye protection at all, with nearly 20% telling us that they have no eye protection for the most severe and most high-risk aerosol diseases. Doctors have said that they're having to reuse masks, that should be single-use only, and that sometimes they're talking to nurses. And nurses are doing some of these high-risk procedures and trying to hold their breath because they're unsure and aware of whether the mask they've been provided is going to offer them adequate protection. So this is really harrowing to hear some of these stories across the NHS.
You're wearing masks, are you?
So certainly still a challenging picture there. We're saying the Health Secretary insists that millions of pieces of PPE are being shipped to the UK and that they are working extremely hard to make sure that the nurses have the equipment that they need. In other very sad news, every day there's sad news, isn't there? Watford General Hospital have confirmed that one of their healthcare workers has very sadly died. John Alagos was 23 years old. It's important to stress that the cause of death is not known. His family believe that he may have had COVID-19. But that has not been confirmed, so very important to be clear about that. But one of his colleagues, Tracy Carter, the chief nurse at Watford General Hospital, released a statement paying tribute to him. She said John was very popular and will be missed greatly by his colleagues, also insisting in that statement that the hospital was taking the necessary precautions to protect their frontline staff. She went on to say, we've always followed the latest PPE guidance, issuing emails to all staff with clear explanations of what PPE to wear, depending on where and when they are working. She went on to say, our clinical areas have the appropriate donning and stopping points for putting on and taking off PPE, and we're getting frequent deliveries of PPE. So another very sad story, amongst which, of course, every day we're hearing some
key workers like NHS staff, doctor staff,
the owner of Longleat House, Lord Bath, has died after contracting coronavirus.
Care workers, support workers,
from Longleat and the Pym family said the 87-year-old passed away on Saturday after being admitted to the Royal United Hospital in Bath. Lord Bath became well known for his eccentric lifestyle, as well as for the safari park built around his stately home. The family thanked the dedicated team of nurses, doctors, and other staff who cared for them.
They are key workers.
As Spain finishes a third week under the state of emergency, there are signs that the number of new infections are slowing. The number of new cases and deaths have both dropped again. In the past day, the number of registered cases there has risen by more than 6,000, bringing Spain's total to just over 130,000. 274 more deaths have been reported. That brings the total to nearly 12,500. Alex Rossi, I can bring us the latest from Madrid contextualizing those numbers.
It's crap.
Muted optimism here about what is happening.
Keeping the sky from my TV. Keeping the sky from the TV.
When you're looking at very, very grim figures indeed, still hundreds of people losing their lives to COVID-19, but you are seeing some hope even in those horrendous figures. So the figures today, 674 deaths, as we were saying, that's down from 809 yesterday. That's the lowest level that this country has seen in 9 days. Remember, they had that record high on Thursday, passing that grim milestone of 10,000 deaths. 950 recorded on Thursday. But they are seeing hope in these numbers. As I was saying, the number of infections is also going down as well. That is also cause for hope.
Ladies and gentlemen,
look at the infections now standing in the country, 130,759, up 6,023. So that is quite a dramatic fall. Health officials are talking about the lockdown here working. It's now being extended to April the 25th. And what's happening is that they're seeing the curve is being suppressed, it's being flattened, and that means, of course, that they're being able to get their health system in better shape to deal with these cases that are coming in. If the systems are in place in the health service, they also have a chance for more serious cases of saving lives. So the lockdown is continuing, but they are having some hope here that what they have put in place is beginning to work, tough as it has been. Stay with us next here on Sky News. Can the Queen lift spirits in a rare address to the nation?
A shit. I don't know what they're talking about. The technicians are shitting. I don't know what they're talking about. I was promised super fast broadband from Sky because I was so tempted to leave and go to BT. They offered me super fast broadband faster than the speed of light. Guess what? Am I getting the super fast broadband faster than the speed of light from Sky? No, I'm not. They failed to promise me. They failed to promise me what I'm paying for. I'm paying for what they told me that they promised me is super fast broadband, faster than the speed of light. Right? That's what they told me. Stupid fucking people they are. The fucking lies. Sky, if you're watching Sky Media, people from Sky Company are watching this broadcast right now, your company is a fucking bunch of lies. A bunch of lies. Right? So, I know at this moment in time, people will be at home, using their internet, the broadband. You're streaming too, are you? Good man, Jaggers. How you doing, my friend? Yeah, I'm doing fine. How about yourself? You alright? You fine? Oh, cool, man. When I finish my podcast, if you're still alive, I'll come over and spread some YouTube love. I'm just trying to keep people get pushed off the coronavirus up base.
The Queen addresses the nation this evening in a televised broadcast that will be
still staying as much as I can.
As households across the country enjoy their second weekend living under lockdown, just what impact will the Lord's words actually have? Our home editor Jason Farrell's been speaking to people in East London to see how they feel about the Queen's decision to reach out and try to reassure the nation.
A bar. I went to put the bar out.
Fearful,
I've been doing that forecast.
The grimness and drudgery of lockdown is starting to hit. Can the Queen connect with the nation and find the words to steer us through it?
Hello, David.
And does what she says matter, for example, to people queuing for food outside Sainsbury's here in East London?
It will make no difference for some people, but it will make a big difference for others. So yeah, I don't see any harm in it at all.
David Cherry, do you play
does that kind of thing help?
Call of Duty?
My type, yes, of course.
On
community
play
GTA on this street, the coffee shop owner now uses his supply lines to create a local grocery store.
If you play on PS4,
a lot of people only contact. So everyone seems really happy to see me and seems to think that it's a nice community
right now who talks on PS4.
But also, like,
it's playing GTA online.
They're going to be isolated.
Maybe you can play together.
Things spike tensions. Why, when other London parks are open, did the local council shut Victoria Park in Hackney, forcing exercise away from open spaces?
I think it's an absolute disgrace.
To be quite
honest. Obviously, initially, people didn't get the social distancing rules, and
David Cherry,
you know, it was quite
both on PS4.
But as you can see now, like, you know, basically
on
forcing people out onto paths, cyclists onto the roads, which, you know, could cause accidents to go into hospital. I think they're much better off opening up, personally.
There's a real concern that not enough is being done to protect our health workers. And in the charity sector, some people trying to help on the ground say no one.
I'm on Xbox, I don't know.
Grassroots charities.
I'm an Xbox game, I'm the other one out here.
Community and don't get paid. We're not allowed loans.
So
I've been refused by my own bank to try and see if I can pay the rent. And the impact is that people in the community are lost.
having lost the income from her charity shops, Nevis Kamal still delivers hot meals to the vulnerable.
And don't worry, things are going to get better.
Would she take
at the moment because I've reached my limit.
God bless the Queen. The Queen has been the figurehead of this country for many, many years. She has seen and heard and done so many, many things. We expect this from our Queen.
It is a rare thing for the Queen to address the nation in this way, no doubt calling for national unity and resolve. This is an unprecedented national moment. Whether you've lost a loved one, or risk losing your job, or are simply frightened, this is something we are all experiencing together. A shared national trauma, and for some, it cuts deep.
With us.
We are reeling from the death toll.
Stay at home and stay safe
on a diet of depression.
Times like that.
Braced for what comes next. Some just want clarity and facts. But for others, the Queen is a symbol of national spirit and resilience. Who, with the right words, can bring comfort and unity.
Is this David? Does it look David? Or is this Big David?
A reminder, you can of course see the Queen's address to the nation in a special programme with Dermot Burnham here on Sky News from 7
GTA, we don't need really me, Eddie and Billy playing.
Just want to bring you a bit of breaking news regarding what's happened in Scotland in the last 24 hours. The Chief Medical Officer there, Catherine Calderwood, was photographed at her second home over the weekend, about 45 miles away from her other home, which many people pointed out broke the social distancing guidelines currently in place. A rather spectacular exchange has taken place. Police Scotland have just released a statement saying that earlier today, local officers visited Dr. Catherine Calderwood, spoke to her about her actions, reiterated crucial advice and issued a warning about her future conduct, all of which she accepted. The legal instructions on not leaving your home without a reasonable excuse apply to everyone. Catherine Calderwood has also apologised for her actions in a separate statement. Quite an astonishing moment there in this coronavirus outbreak story. Stay with us here on Sky News. Coming up next, we'll show you how the world responded to the pandemic in a special report.
Yeah, and David, who's on the Xbox One, okay, yeah. Hey, shut up, you fucking Streamlabs. What's the wrong there? Fucking idiot. Fucking Streamlab. What the fuck is Streamlabs like, eh? Anyway, David on the Xbox One. If you're on later on with me, Eddie, and Philly, we could probably do the we could probably do a casino heist. We could probably set up a casino heist on GTA up tonight. Alright, when Eddie and Billy's on. Alright, we're also going to do some selling of the what's it called? And you know what? Don't you hate it when you want to say something and you can't get it out? You got it in here, but it doesn't come out. You hate that. I hate it. So please keep the chat moving. Please talk about the coronavirus. Please keep your views out. Tell them what you're doing to keep yourself safe. Alright? In times like that. Well, David Cherry, I personally can't add you on because I'm on PS4. not PS4, Xbox One, sorry. I'm an Xbox One, not PS4. Right, but Jagger, he's on PS4. So Jagger, are you still in, my friend? If I do this, and Jagger is there. Right, hang on. You hear Jagger in a minute. Live on PS4. Oh. Hang on, Jag. My mate Dave is on PS4. He is gamer tag is
Right, back coming.
At the making here, Jagged live. Soon a Land Rover Discovery. Oh, I love them. I love those cars. I love those cars. I can't. If I could afford the Land Rover, I would. I would buy myself a Land Rover if I could afford to buy a Land Rover and insure it. I love my Land Rovers. I mean.
Oh shit.
So if I share his broadcast onto my timeline, all right, and say live on PS4, live on PS4. This game, this view food is. That's it. Just shared your live my face profile. Okay, sorry, I was just doing some YouTube love here with spreading some YouTube love with someone who's playing the car has a fully as an ugly. Don't you like the look of it? I'll go back to it now.
The epidemic they are probably more secure, sure here than in England, because I don't understand why the government didn't decide in time to protect the citizens.
Find it hard to
in Baltimore, the only people allowed to gather, always keeping apart, are those registering deaths.
Because
the vast majority of those dying here are in the high-risk elderly group. Serena and Michaeli are both 73. They came out to get some sun for the first time in days. They never leave each other, and they meet no one. They're still scared.
Anche adesso perché siamo sempre nella curva crescente. E quindi per ora sono continuamente in aumento i casi di
preoccupati, un po' spaventati. Make a coffee.
Cerchiamo di
Right. Well, I'm going to turn the audio up. I'm going to put the news on here, okay? And we're going to talk about what we hear here.
Times are strictly allotted for the funerals of loved ones to take place, and there's a huge backlog. People only break the curfew to pay their respects.
Don't throw your head in the sand like you would never catch and think you would never catch the coronavirus.
This is a family and a funeral that we know nothing of.
We do not know.
But many of us will likely experience what they're going through.
Can you hear me?
Very soon.
David Cherry, can you still hear me? Guys, can you hear me still?
They've run out of room at the morgue, but they haven't run out of respect for the dead here at Cremona Hospital. The next batch of the lost, waiting for cremation, are laid out in the hospital chapel before collection. Their families couldn't even say goodbye. They're all in quarantine. It's a recurring theme now. Everyone dies alone. They came from the hospital's intensive care unit. It's on the brink of collapse. This is what it looks like when the virus overwhelms. And here in Lombardy, it is overwhelming. These patients are critically ill. In all probability, they won't make it. The staff have no cure. They're just trying to keep them alive. Every 13 to 16 hours, they turn the patients over to relieve the pressure on the lungs. Without doubt, she wouldn't survive without constant attention. The patients are highly contagious. Where possible, they're observed from a distance. But most of the time, that isn't possible. Nobody takes any risks. Gloves, masks, and protective clothes are regularly changed. In truth, these men and women are exhausted. The system is at breaking point, and they are as well. But they keep going. They're at the front line in this war. They are the only line.
It's a very dangerous, it's a disaster, it's a tsunami. We are here 12 hours a day. Only
I haven't tried the Starbucks coffee, so I'm keen on Starbucks.
In a few hours, and
I like Costa coffee more than Starbucks.
Because we are here for the patients.
2 weeks, he's getting better. But in that fortnight, not one other person improved. The only illnesses being treated in Cremona Hospital are linked to the virus, and it's spreading.
Yeah. It's spreading, right?
Side of the
it's spreading because people are not taking the coronavirus serious. It's serious.
What's already in 1 day?
It's a serious disease. It's a serious illness. It needs to be taken serious. At any time, it can.
Emanuela Catanacci is a neurosurgeon normally. Now she's working in intensive care. She has to send this message to the world. Lockdown.
Our countries,
if you can see what
from the coronavirus,
country or
we all need to work together.
part
Not just the UK, everyone.
We need to do something. I think now it's not more an option.
No, I haven't tried Starbucks coffee.
Exactly what
I haven't tried Starbucks coffee, David. I don't like Starbucks. I like Costa coffee. Costa.
Everywhere else.
Costa coffee's nice. Well, that's in my eyes. In my eyes, Costa coffee's nice.
And this is life in lockdown. It never stops.
They're telling people to stay indoors. This is what a total lockdown looks like in Bergamo. It's quite scary, and you don't really get used to it. It doesn't feel that life here will ever be the same again. In the total lockdown, volunteers take food and supplies to the most vulnerable, the old and the already sick. They also take medicine to those who would die if they were infected. Valentino Trivia lost his uncle to the virus. He wants to help. Like so many, he's broken inside.
Perché
hang on. Hang on!
Stiamo sentendo molta gente che è in difficoltà. Tanto stare a casa continui solo a pensarci.
He was the same thing, mate. You're doing the same thing.
The mayor here is working 20 hours a day. He's obsessed with COVID-19 data, contacting the mayors of other towns and building a picture of the death rate here. He's convinced the official numbers are an underestimate because too many deaths are not being included.
In this moment, only people with heart symptoms are tested.
Who do not.
If you are with a high temperature in your home with cough, no, you are not detected. The doctor will say you stay at home.
I hadn't thought of that, but I don't wear tampons.
And if you breathe quite well,
but yeah, now you mentioned it. Yeah, I do actually think that. I'm not thinking about it. How often are they changing the disposable gloves? They're making things like tampons.
The statistics, okay. If you die in this condition, you are out of the radar. You know, you are not considered as died.
Okay, hello to Italy. How are you doing, Italy? How are you doing, Italy?
Recent figures have indicated that death and infection rates are slowing, but in reality, you'd never know. The sirens never stop.
I know it's life.
There is a very long way to go. Overnight, the military cleared the bodies from the hospital morgue because it was full. This is the next day, and the morgue is already
the virus. Right, everyone
Italy's healthcare system has been swamped by this virus.
For those of us who are at home, isolating.
Other countries saw the measures they had put in place and began preparing for the inevitable.
We're on our Xboxes or PS4s or iPhones, iPads, tablets, surfing the internet. So our internet will be slower, but then normal, right? I bet imagine what okay, David, Jerry, you're now a monitor. If you haven't yet already, click that big red button at the top of my channel. If you haven't yet already, click that big red button. Please, 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 please. Click that big red button. Become part of the GSS family. Click that, give me a like if you can. If you like the forecast, click that thumbs up, give me a like. Please click that red button, the big red button if you haven't already. go over and click that big bell icon to turn on notifications. You can see when I next go live or next upload a video. No, I haven't. I didn't know Miss Bitch had a Costa coffee. I didn't know they'd done drive-throughs either. Wow, Costa Coffee, you're moving with the times. Well done, Costa Coffee. Hey, David. Look at that! Look at this sexy mug. I mean, this sexy mug, not this one. Hey, David, have you noticed that you're now one of the non-watchers? If I actually, where is it? Where's the Jagger? There he is. Add him as Potter. Right. I don't know about this guy here. I don't know if I've got him. I've never seen him before. But if he's right.
With many countries in total lockdown, preparations have been stepped up everywhere for the battle to come. This is a healthcare emergency, the likes of which has never been seen.
Allowed to go out and on a daily exercise if
invisible.
People don't take it personally.
London's Excel Centre has been transformed into a makeshift hospital that could cater for up to 4,000 COVID-19 patients. It is desperately needed extra capacity.
It was only, I think it was last Wednesday I was here, and this place, this Excel Centre, was just an aircraft hangar. All I could see was some lorries. There was an Arctic lorries here last Tuesday, Wednesday when I was first here. And now we've got fully ready to take some patients. Now there's still a lot more work yet to be done, but huge progress about building a hospital in London, Nightingale, London, in just less than 2 weeks.
It looks unbelievable. Actually pretty.
This was a project built at breathtaking speed from blank sheet
like a
to fully operational hospital in less than a fortnight. A 21st century global pandemic requires a global response, and the NHS Nightingale is just that.
We take our resources from NHS London, and we want to be coordinated from the centre so that they know the best places to deploy staff and deploy resources. At that point, we'll be ready to receive the equipment, the staff, and then the patients at scale and at
it's life, mate. It is life at the moment. At the moment, that is our life. Our life is keeping away from the grind of the coronavirus.
And his aides has been marshalled. Talk of battle lines being drawn. So it's right the military was asked to deliver this logistical engineering masterclass.
Right.
It's an unseen enemy. It's still a battle, and it's still timelines that you're working to. And
it doesn't have to be like
get ahead of the picture. You're trying to get ahead of the enemy, and in this case, you're trying to get ahead of the virus. And so the whole idea about building at scale and pace is to build a really fantastic facility that's going to save patient care at scale and keep ahead of the battle, keep ahead of the virus.
The private healthcare sector will provide up to 8,000 more beds, 1,200 ventilators, and almost 20,000 staff. Nurses in London posted these photographs showing them wearing clinical waste bags on their heads.
Hang on, let me read this.
Personal protective equipment.
It is absolutely paramount
they can hear me
that
a bit more
the doctors and nurses and care staff that serve our vulnerable, that treat people with the disease, are being adequately protected so that not only can they protect themselves, but they can prevent themselves from spreading it to others.
Dr. Amjad El-Harani became one of the first senior British medics to lose their lives to the virus. He had been working at the university hospitals of Derby and Burton. As the UK lockdown continues, police have been told to be consistent in their approach After officers in Derbyshire used drones to film people hiking in the district.
People do take. People are taking the coronavirus like and treating it as a joke. The coronavirus is not a joke.
An extra 80 million shopping trips were recorded.
The
United States has now overtaken China and Italy to become the country with the most reported cases of the disease. Hundreds have died,
it's a serious
and 3 million people have lost their jobs.
At this moment, right?
Queens in New York is the worst infected district in what is now the world's worst infected city.
When you go out,
and the doctors and nurses don't know what has hit them.
You need to wear a mask. Right? Either a disposable mask or you get a mask that you wash, right? And then dry and reuse. I've got a mask that you wash and reuse, right? You wear gloves when you go out.
My daughter is an intern in Brooklyn, first year resident.
When you get home, you wash your hands, right?
I couldn't sleep last
night. Thoroughly. Just got hand wash on your hand.
They're overrun in this hospital.
Foam it up.
In an email, the chief medical officer told staff it was the humanitarian
wash your hands under hot water, hotter than
every day.
As hot as you can take. Unfortunately, hot water is the hottest you can take. Right? And then you dry your hands with a paper towel. Because you wipe your hands, you dry your hands, and then you bin the towel. You need disposable paper towel.
The situation because it's so hard to think about this.
Right.
And we try to do our best. The only thing I ask everyone, I know you guys from England, we live in the States, stay at home if you don't need to go anywhere. Don't try to do anything crazy right now. It's a serious pandemic.
Sky.
New York.
Oh, you got a new dog. So you got Sky broadband. And you named the dog Sky.
9/11.
So you need to get another dog now because it's got BT.
Who never came. Okay. Now they just keep coming. And they're all ages. Don't delude yourself into thinking only the old will die or will get it. They're all ages.
At this testing facility, people queued in the rain. It was miserable.
I just saw a Chinese woman wearing a mask,
tested for
but the mask
in New York,
was here.
You better.
Her nose was outside the mask. Right? The mask you're supposed to have over your mouth and your nose. Right? I had to clean. I washed my hands before I started to dive. Right?
You're waiting for 5 hours.
I washed my face and my
how are you feeling at the moment?
My hands before I started the live.
Do they feel it?
Right? Because I knew when I'm doing these, I'll get itchy. Right? The mask could be held. It's supposed to be like this, right?
Non-stop.
So it's supposed to wear them like wear masks like this. Over your mouth and your nose.
There are now 4 times more cases
but I saw a Chinese woman
than in the whole of the United Kingdom.
On now, on the news,
live
on the
emergency hospital
on YouTube. Sky News live on YouTube. There's
this
a Chinese woman wearing her mask like this. What's the fucking point? Wearing the fucking mask.
COVID patients.
The only thing you're covering is your mouth.
Hospitals for others.
You're supposed to cover both your nose and your mouth.
And in Central Park, the Samaritans have set up a field hospital which was used to treat casualties in Iraq.
What you see behind us is what we
call fucking stupid woman.
It's a field hospital. It has 68 beds within it. 10 of those beds are ICU beds here in this tent right behind us. Those will be able to provide.
Okay, David, man, how you doing, mate? And thank you for dropping by. Thank you for dropping by and talking with me here on YouTube Live. Enjoy your game of
in Thailand, they've launched a new rapid test
gives
a result in under 15 minutes.
Enjoy your game.
50 patients a day can be tested.
So your
blood is taken,
okay,
and they're looking for antibodies.
Be careful. Be careful and take don't rush in on doing the heist. Don't rush in.
Means negative and 14 days quarantine. But a faint second line is a period. He's just been told he is positive, and he's worried because his elderly father has just had an operation, and he doesn't want to infect the whole family.
Anyway, David. David, he's still there, my friend. He's still there, man.
Doctors currently overwhelmed by a flood of patients terrified.
Enjoy the game, my friend.
The plan is to roll them out nationwide. This outbreak started in the Chinese city of Wuhan. Now, China is building a fortress to stop it. The Sky News China team were in Seoul, in South Korea, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry announced it was closing its borders to foreigners. They raced to get back to Beijing. Their temperature had to be below 37 degrees to board, and they kept checking. Flying to another country is now like traveling to another reality.
You know what, like I said,
these aren't healthcare workers, they're cabin crew.
Been told before, I'm saying it now, the coronavirus is a Chinese brand. A Chinese brand. It's Chinese. It came from China. It came from China. Right?
There was an army of officials.
The Chinese got rid of the coronavirus first,
hundreds of miles away.
but they never closed down their borders. Right?
Every passenger was tested for COVID-19.
Got it. They got it. They got the coronavirus first. They should have closed the borders, grounded every flight in and out of their country. Right? And the airport.
They made it back.
Goes the airport, goes the airports, grounded their flights in and out of their country.
But they would not be going
the dockyards.
A new policy was now in place.
Locked their country down tighter than a nut crack.
For 14 days in quarantine.
In China,
by the Chinese state.
But before this got worse,
be left outside their door. And they'd be paying just over £40 a night.
I shouldn't say that, I shouldn't agree. But you're right. I shouldn't agree because I've got Chinese nephews, half Chinese nephews.
Now that the virus,
but they're from over here, so
China,
British made. My Chinese nephews are British made, so
since World War II. Record daily fatalities have been reported in the UK.
In the Chinese country,
and Russia.
When they realised they've got the coronavirus, if they closed their borders, grounded every flight in and out of their country, and grounded every ferry, every cruise ship in and out of their country, all right, closed their borders down, tried to announce crack, right? The coronavirus would have spread to other countries. England, right, Britain, we've not got the coronavirus. It started from China. China got rid of it, had it, lost it, and then we got it. Right? Boris Johnson, right, this is what we need. I'm telling you now, Boris Johnson, right? Man up. Right, man up. Close your borders. Lock this country down tighter than a fucking nun's crack. Right. Bring the fucking armed forces out. Patrol our streets. Right. With fucking guns. Right. That will frighten people out of being outside unnecessary. Right. Come on, Boris Johnson. You're the man with the fucking power. Man up. Support your country that you're supposed to support. Support the country you're supposed to run. Fucking idiot. Boring, boom, and gloom. What's boring, boom, and gloom? This life at the moment boring, boom, and gloom. And I'm fucking saying how it is. Yeah, we know it's Chinese made. Fucking, it's a bit like my CCTV cameras. Chinese made, and guess what? The Chinese company where my DVRs are actually from, they don't want to help you. Luckily, I know how to repair them if they go wrong. Gareth, stop thinking of your fucking manhood, you dirty man. But you know what? Yeah, you're right. So the Chinese women, a lot of the Chinese women are fucking fit. I mean, fit. Right? But what if you do? You don't want to date a Chinese woman. You know why? Because the lady gardens go sideways. So, right, so they're falling down the stairs, it sounds like this. And then they're all on the side. If they're not wearing any fucking knickers, they get stuck to the fucking tile floor. It's looking like a plunger. Oh God! You need fucking the spatula to sort of fucking get off the fucking floor. Sorry, Chinese, simply taking the mickey out, yeah, like that. It's only jokes. It's only jokes. You can get you some ling ling someday. Oh yeah, watch out for the Sidebridge Lady Gardens. Yeah, watch out for the Chinese Lady Gardens. They go sideways.
This is Sky News. The headlines for you at 2 o'clock. The government warns further lockdown measures may come into place if people continue to flout the rules and go out to enjoy the warm weather.
You are putting others' lives at risk, and you're putting yourself in harm's way.
The frontline NHS workers still struggling to get the right personal protection equipment.
Nurses are doing some of these high-risk procedures and trying to hold their breath because they're unsure and unaware of whether the mask they've been provided is going to offer them adequate protection.
Calls for Scotland's chief medical officer to resign after she is seen breaking social
we don't take
distancing
the coronavirus seriously, we don't listen to the rules, right? But we set in place to protect us from the coronavirus, right?
Where both the number of cases and
the only time we've been out of our properties, out of our homes, right, would be when we.
Good afternoon. We're expecting an update from the Department of Health on the latest COVID-19.
Our weekly shot, right? And it'll be able to be going up. Be our weekly shot
as we get them. First, though, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock has criticised sunbathers.
We will not be able to go out other than do the weekly shot if it carries on.
And said that if they fail to do so, then restrictions, including the banning of outdoor exercise, could follow. That has
outdoor exercise would be wiped out. We'll not be able to do it.
This is what the Health Secretary had to say on Sophie Ridge on Sunday about those ignoring the rules and enjoying the good weather.
It is not a request, it is a requirement in law, and people need to follow it. And I just say this to the very small minority, as you say, of people who are choosing to flout the guidance. You are putting others' lives at risk, and you're putting yourself in harm's way. And so we are very, very clear about that guidance. And
so does that mean, just to be crystal clear, that sunbathing is against the law?
Sunbathing is against the rules that have been set out for important public health reasons. And you know, I wish I didn't have to say this, but I do, because the whole country wants to come through this crisis. The whole country wants to come through this, of course, as quickly as possible. And the fastest way to come through the guidance, the crisis, and to save lives, and to protect the NHS and reduce the pressure on the NHS.
Do you want to go to the back garden?
The fastest way to do that is to follow the guidance,
to stay at home as
stay
well.
at home, unless you've got one of the four reasons that we've set out.
That is fine.
Sure, our political correspondent Tom Rayner. Afternoon to you, Tom. So this suggestion potentially about banning exercise comes after pictures yesterday where people seem to flock to many parks.
Yeah, I think, look, there is a clear concern in government about the risk of complacency. We are only 2 weeks in to the more formalised lockdown that the government announced. There's another week to go of that initial period of restriction, but the expectations are that these are conditions that are going to need to be extended potentially for some time. And so the government are trying to emphasise that now is not the time to take the foot off the pedal with regards to strict social distancing and people staying at home. And that is why we've had this warning from the Health Secretary that if it is deemed by the government that people are not observing the regulations appropriately, then they may need to be toughened, and they may need to go down that route that we've seen imposed in places like Italy and France, where actually outdoor exercise isn't any longer allowed, despite the health and mental health benefits that clearly it offers. Now, speaking to Sophie Ridge earlier, Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, the new deputy leader, said that while she thought that this was appropriate and that in some ways it's much easier if you're in a big house with a big garden, she did raise concerns about those people in inadequate accomadation living on top of one another. And so she said that the government should ensure that if there is a toughening of restrictions, they should ensure that they're both reasonable and proportionate. We also heard from the new Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and he, according to information we've just had, has been briefed by senior government officials over the course of the morning, including the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor. In that call, Mr. Starmer reiterated his determination to work constructively with the government. And when he spoke to us earlier, he reiterated that point and also said that he would look at any potential need to toughen measures in line with the government advisors' information. This is what he said.
What's important is that we support the government where that's the right thing to do, but ask the difficult questions. But we ask the difficult questions not to score party political points, not just because we can, but so that we can point out what we think are errors so that they can be put right. But I'm clear that whatever measures are necessary to save lives should be taken. And so we'll look at what the experts say, we'll look at what the government has to say, but I think the priority is to protect lives.
We haven't, of course, reached the peak yet. Some suggestion it could happen next weekend, but already talk of an exit strategy being discussed.
Yeah, look, I think for the moment, the government's key priority, and it was made quite clear by the Health Secretary that this was the case, is to try and ensure the peak is as low as possible. That is why the social distancing measures are in place, to reduce the peak and reduce the chance that when it comes, it goes above the capacity of the NHS and means that the health service is unable to cope with the number of cases that it is dealing with. That is what everything is aimed at in terms of priorities at the moment. But you're right, there are increasing questions about how the UK gets itself out of the measures that have been put in place and what the strategy for that is. Now, Keir Starmer, the new Labour leader, writing in the Sunday Times today, has called on the government to publish its exit strategy and to set out the details in terms of how it is planning to do that. Well, the government
will be going live on Facebook as well.
Speaking to Sophie Ridge earlier, did set out something that approached a plan. He said that there were 3 requirements for any exit strategy. There was no timeline for this yet, but the way out, as he put it, either is via pharmaceutical treatments, which enable people to be treated. Work is ongoing on that. Or the development of a vaccine, or finally, ramped up testing.
Hit that big red subscribe button. Please go over.
The UK has put more funding into the global search for vaccine than any other country around the world, and I'm working very closely with the Defence Secretary and the Foreign Secretary on that, because they've been leading that global search, and their budgets into that. As well as obviously treatments and vaccines, testing matters as well. And we had a very big discussion about testing over the last week, and we have a clear strategy to increase the amount of testing.
And you heard the Health Secretary there referencing other colleagues that he's working closely with in other departments. There have been some suggestions in the newspapers today of tensions between the Treasury and the Health Department over this question of whether there is a coherent exit strategy in place. Speaking to people close to Matt Hancock, the sense is that they dismiss that there are these frustrations, but I think it is clearly the case that there is nervousness within government, that the major economic packages that have been set out and the major impact that there has been across all government departments in the wake of this COVID-19 outbreak has left many wanting to know what the clear route out of this is. And for now, because public health is right at the centre of this, clearly a lot of the questions that are being asked are towards the Department of Health and Matt Hancock and of course, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Right, Tom, many thanks indeed for now. Tom Rayner there. Let's tell you about another development. Scotland's Chief Medical Officer has apologised after being spotted walking with her family near her second home. Dr. Catherine Calderwood tweeted a photo of her family clapping the NHS outside her home in Edinburgh on Thursday. However, this weekend, she was seen some 44 miles away with her husband and children near the coastal retreat in Fife. Well, that's generated a warning from Police Scotland. Chief Constable Ian Livingston has said earlier today local officers visited Dr. Catherine Calderwood and spoke to her about her actions, reiterated crucial advice and issued a warning about her future conduct, all of which she accepted. Individuals, he says, must not make personal exemptions bespoke to their own circumstances. It is vital, the statement concludes, that everyone adheres to these requirements. Now, Scotland's Chief Medical Officer, in a statement herself, has said, while there are reasons for what I did, they do not justify it, and they were not legitimate reasons to be out of my home while I and my family followed guidance on social distancing at all times. I understand that I did not follow the advice I am giving to others. And she says, I am truly sorry for that. Now, a note that we will bring you the live daily COVID-19 briefing from Scotland's First Minister. That is due at around 2:30, so do stay with us for that. Let's talk about the Queen now, who is going to speak to the nation tonight in a rare address from Windsor Castle amid the pandemic. She would insist that Britons of this generation were as strong as any in facing the crisis. Our royal correspondent Rhiannon Mills joins us now from Windsor. And Rhiannon, this an attempt to bring some element of calm, I guess, at a time of great concern.
I think many people have been wondering exactly when we would hear from the Queen, and certainly over the last couple of weeks, everything I've been hearing from the palace was a case of when and not if the Queen would give this kind of televised address. It is incredibly rare for her to record this kind of message. It's only happened on 4 other occasions during her 68-year reign. But I think you have to look at the enormity of what the country is facing at the moment, the fact that it isn't just affecting small groups, it is literally affecting the entire country. And in her message, she will talk about how really this has brought enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. So I think for the palace and also for Number 10, they've been working very closely together to try and pick the ideal moment, really, when they hope that this message will have the maximum impact. I think a couple of reasons why they've chosen now. It is for the Queen, it's the run up to Easter. Of course, her own personal religious faith is very important for her, so potentially a chance for her to talk about keeping faith at a time when many of us would be surrounded by our families. Of course, now we can't do that because of social distancing restrictions. But also, of course, as we keep hearing, the number of cases keep going up, the number of deaths keep going up. And Number 10 will be very aware, and the palace very aware, that yes, while some people don't necessarily like the fact that we have a constitutional monarchy, the royal family is still widely respected. And also people are prone to listen to what the Queen has to say. In terms of this having to change the way that we all live and work, really the way this message was recorded was also highly unusual. I'm told it was logistically very challenging because they didn't want to put the Queen at risk. So they had to choose a room that was big enough that just the Queen and one cameraman could be in there. The cameraman was wearing a mask and gloves to make sure that the Queen wasn't put at risk. But also within this message, I think you do get that clear sense that the Queen, over that very long reign, has faced so many different challenges and difficulties. She will reflect on that, but also she talks with this phrase about fellow feeling. I think it feels like a phrase from a different kind of era, and that's the message that she will put across, is that future generations will hopefully look back at this time. Yes, it's very difficult now, but hopefully people will look back and be proud of how Britain rose to the challenge.
All right, Rhiannon, many thanks indeed. Rhiannon Mills there at Windsor Castle. Now, don't forget, you can watch the Queen's address to the nation tonight. We have a special programme with Dermot Murnaghan that starts here on Sky News at 7 o'clock. Do tune in. Now, as Spain finishes a third week under a state of emergency, there are signs the number of new infections there are slowing. The number of new cases and deaths have both dropped again. In the past day, the number of registered cases has risen by more than 6,000, bringing Spain's total cases to 130,759. 674 more deaths have been reported, and that brings the total to nearly 12,500. Alex Rossi can bring us the latest now from Madrid.
Muted optimism here, really, about what is happening. I suppose it's quite telling about what this disease is doing to countries. When you're looking at very, very grim figures indeed, still hundreds of people losing their lives to COVID-19, but you are seeing some hope even in those horrendous figures. So the figures today, 674 deaths, as you were saying, that's down from 809 yesterday. That's the lowest level that this country has seen in 9 days. Remember, they had that record high on Thursday, passing that grim milestone of 10,000 deaths, 950 recorded on Thursday. But they are seeing hope in these numbers. As I was saying, the number of infections is also going down as well. That is also cause for hope. You look at the infections now standing in the country, 130,759, up 6,023. So that is quite a dramatic fall. Health officials are talking about the lockdown here working. It's now been extended to April the 25th. And what's happening is that they're seeing that the curve is being suppressed. It's been flattened.
Why do you
and that
think
means,
it's
of
been
course, that
extended to
they're
April
being able to get their
25th?
health system in better shape
People are
to
not
deal with these
listening
cases
and
that are
taking
coming
it.
in. If the systems are in place in the health service, they also have a chance for the more serious cases of saving lives. So the lockdown is continuing, but they are having some hope here that what they have put in place is beginning to work, tough as it has been.
Equipment like masks and gloves and washing the hands.
Now, COVID-19 may have started there, but China is now managing to contain the disease better than most countries. However, questions are being asked about why the virus was allowed to develop in the first place. Attention has turned to the country's use of wet markets, where live animals are sold alongside meat and seafood. Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Tom Tugendhat, joins me. He's called for a reset in relations with the country, and as you can see, joins us now. Very good afternoon to you. Highly critical of China, aren't you, and their approach?
Well, I'm critical of the dishonesty that we've seen coming out of Beijing. Look, I mean, you're quite right that they faced a very severe challenge here, and in some ways they've dealt with it well. But one way in which they haven't is we simply have no idea what the figures coming out of China really are. And we know that the figures are wrong because we've seen consistent evidence that China is simply not being honest. So when we have people saying following the China model and then using it to extrapolate for example, the United Kingdom or Italy or anywhere else, that's extremely deceptive because there isn't a China model. The China model is a work of fiction, and therefore it's really hard for anybody to model off it.
Yet China appears, as they would say, to be coming out of this and completely easing restrictions now. Certainly in Wuhan and Hubei province, they're relaxing
ladies and gents,
limits
I think
on
what I should
travel,
do,
aren't they?
I'll pause up there a minute. I'm going to actually end this broadcast here because people are coming and going. And I'm going to go live on my Facebook page with the same live broadcast, but I'm going from YouTube to Facebook. All right, to get more people and to listen, to get people to reach out to more people, and get them to sort of heed the warnings. Okay, so until the next live broadcast, my friends, take care of yourself and each other. All right, and for God's sake, stay at home until the coronavirus is over. Only go out if you really need to. All right, and wear protective masks and protective gloves. Wash your hands. Use hand sanitizer if you can. Okay. Think of yourself and other people at a time like this. Okay. Speak to us, my friends. Bye bye.